Hi everyone, and welcome to webinar 3. Today we'll be covering security. We're covering the various aspects of the security provider. We'll be looking at login and log out, adding security restrictions, password updating and password recovery. We're going to be building on what we had last time and extending that to provide these facilities. Just give me one more. I'm just going to get rid of. That's it. Get the Wappler screen back up. So remember where we were last week. We created our contract management system and we'd added the facility to be able to add, remove, etc. people from within that. And those are the basic concepts that you need to be able to do pretty much anything involving databases. So this week we're going to start looking using similar sort of techniques to add and remove the details of that people have for login, but we're using it within a login context. First thing I'm going to do is just introduce you to yet another different database management piece of software. This one is Navicat. If you remember, we used Heidi last week, and the week before we used the inbuilt PHP MyAdmin. And the first thing I'm going to do is to add a new table in there, and this will be the table we're using for our users. So I'm going to create a new table. Yeah, Navicat is brilliant, I quite agree. So we're going to call that user ID we'll start with. And that's going to be our primary key, so we'll be auto-incrementing that. Secondly, we're going to be having an email, and that will be what we're using for a login. We'll make that, let's say, varchar, and let's allow 120 characters on that one. We'll add a password field. Now, password, we're going to be a little bit different here. I'm not going to use a varchar, and I'm going to explain why we're going to do this right from the start. We're going to be using secure hashing algorithms, SHA algorithms, within our system here, and therefore we will always, as a result, have a fixed length of encrypted key. We're going to be using SHA-256. That will always give us a 64-character long string. So rather than using varchar, I'm actually just going to use char here. I don't think it makes a huge difference, to be honest. Marginal difference in performance perhaps, but let's do things right from the start. And then our last field is going to be the role that the user has, and in this case I'm going to use a char field again. It's going to be 1 character long, and I'm going to stick a default of U for user. Everybody follow that up now, okay? So I'm going to save that table now, and I'm just going to call that users. Okay, that's got us our basic table that we needed. So now we can close down Navicat for the moment. Just drag that off screen. First thing we're going to do straight away is I'm going to go into App Connect, and I'm going to refresh the database connection because we've added a new table. So we'll still use the same connection, but if I just open that and save that, that will refresh the schema in Wappler, so the Wappler knows that we've added that new table. Okay, now we can go over to our first parts of creating our logins. So right, first part, I think was maybe have a new file here. We'll make that a PHP file. It's pretty important that you have some form of scripting on this, because the security provider itself does use scripted code. So if you're using an HTML page, you'll have issues there regarding running the scripts. And the first thing we're going to do is create a sign up page. I want to show you a little, shall we call, I'm not going to call it a bug because it's not a bug, everything works, but a quirk on the Wappler here. If I go into forms and then the blocks, you'll see there are certain blocks available here. Sorry, if I click on the right thing, there will be. You see we've got full page. We do have a login here, a login block, settings, you name it. What we don't have is sign up. But if we then add a container and then go back into our forms and blocks, we'll find we actually have different ones available there. So you click on there, we now have a sign up, etc. I'm not sure what the idea of the design is behind that, but as long as you know that's there, then let's not worry about it. So I'm just going to create a nice simple sign up form. So there's our form there. It's been created automatically from the blocks, and we'll be going to use an email and a password sign up. Let's just tidy things up a little bit straight away. This is going to be a submit button. Let's just give it a bit of colour so we can see it. We'll call that sign up. Let's just push it down the page a little bit. Maybe pop a little bit of a border around there just so we can make it stand out a little bit more. So that to get a border, we can just pick a border. I like rounded borders, small, and we'll just make it green border. Don't worry about these blue lines here. These are just guidelines for Wappler. If we take that out, we can see that actually that green border stands out. Let's just save that, and we're going to call that, surprise, surprise, we're going to call that sign up. Didn't mean to do that, sorry. That's a problem when you're working live. There we go. I'm just going to add a little bit of a bottom of that button as well, because it doesn't look very tidy there, does it? Yeah, Theatre Geek, I see you've never actually used any of the pre-made form blocks. I do from time to time. They are useful if you want to do things quickly. They're quite well written, and certainly in an environment like this where we've got a limited amount of time to do quite a lot, they're a really, really useful tool. So there's our sign up page done. That was pretty hard. So we're going to go now over to an App Connect end, and we're going to create a new server action, and we'll call that sign up. Let's go into our globals, tell it what our link page is going to be, which is sign up. We can then pick the form within there, and we can import those details through. What I should really have done first of all was to put some validation in over here. So I'm going to just pop back to that and just do the validation side of things. So obviously don't want people signing up with blank stuff. I'll just pop over the validation rules, and that's required. And it needs to be an email. And this field here, the password field, is going to be required, and let's say it has to be a minimum length of 8, and let's make sure it is alphanumeric. Now again, a little quirk of Wappler, if we then re-import those fields back in, you'll see that the validations aren't imported. So what we actually need to do is take them out again, and now we can re-import, and you'll see that those validations are pulled through from that form. Just going to quickly save that. Okay, so what we need to do now is to capture the output of that form and write that to the database storing the login name, which will be the email address and the password. Really straightforward process. Let's start with, we want to have our database connection. We'll just use the one we used the other day because it's got all the appropriate settings. And then we're going to database action, and we're going to have a database insert. What we're going to do is we're going to insert into that users table, and you'll see it's available now because we can see it within, we refreshed the schema. We don't need to save the role because that's fixed, but we could force it into another role if we wanted. So I'm just going to take that out. So our email field is going to pick up the contents of that email, and our password field is going to pick up password, but we don't want a plain text password. Anybody I think now who stores passwords in plain text is a disaster waiting to happen. We really need to make sure that these are encrypted to protect the customer, users, whatever you want to call them's privacy. So what we're going to do there is we're going to save that as an encrypted one. So we're going to look at cryptographic, SHA-256, ask for assault, and I'm just going to use a nice easy one because I can remember it for later use. Let's just say Wappler rocks! ! And that is it. That's all that actually needs to be done for the save. Right, Magic Bytes. Do you need to choose every time the existing database connection for each server action? Yes, before you can actually perform any form of query, you effectively have to create a connection to the database. So the first stage before any query will be select that database connection. But because it is a linked connection, then we can select the same connection over and over again. So it's just a few seconds just to quickly add that in. But without that database connection stage, then the database query would have no idea which database it was acting on. So we'll go back to our sign up form now. That's going to be a post. Our action is going to be that new sign up action that we've created. Just make sure that is saved. Oh, welcome Theodore, nice to see you joined us. Right, so we've got our sign up form. It's going to insert that information into the database. It's going to encrypt it. We're going to end up with a 64-character long encrypted password. What we need to do now is just to tidy up the App Connect end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a component called the browser. Because what I'm going to do is, on success of that form, so server connect success, I'm just going to divert it to, and I'm just going to use that original home page. I'm not going to write a new page at this stage. So now if that sign up is successful, we should be taken to the index.php page at the end of it. Just reading to you about the global connections. I think I spoke to you about that a few weeks ago. I think that would be a really useful feature, so you could have a fallback global connection. Looking forward to seeing that. Okay, and I think important that we also have an error message, and for the error message we're going to use the notifies. So into those events, server connect, in the event of an error, we need to just tell the people that there is one. So we're going to go to notifications. We'll use a danger, a nice red one, and just say error. Okay, just double check we've got everything here. We've got post method. We've got our button set to submit. Let's save that and let's just check to see how that works. So I'm going to open that up in the browser. just take that out to full screen, and we're going to add an email in. Let's say Brian at datalogistics.uk. You see what to check there to say that's a valid email address, and we'll have a nice complicated password in. Click sign up, and there you see we've been diverted back to the index.php page, which suggests that everything's worked all right. I see a few people have been busy. There suddenly seems to be a lot of test records being added in there. That's what it's there for, and I'm just going to call up that database page now. There's our table, and you see there it has correctly inserted Brian at datalogistics.uk. That's our encrypted password, and the role is set to user. So there we go, that's stage 1 done. That was really straightforward. Let's go back into Wappler now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extend that, because what I'm actually going to do is to extend it so that when you sign up, you then automatically log in to the system. A lot of systems do that, some don't. I feel it's a bit crazy to have to sign up and then use those sign up credentials to log in. So I'm now going to extend that, and we're going to come straight away to look at something called the security provider. And we're going to call this basic, because I'm going to go through the 3 different types of security provider that are available. Basic security provider is literally down to having a single username and password, so it doesn't involve a database, and everybody will use the same username and password. So you could actually write anything in there, and that would become the global password for the entire system. Not terribly secure, but it's handy in some cases where people want just very basic levels of security. Our second level would be static. That goes a little bit further, because we can actually add usernames, passwords and permissions into that, so we can create different usernames and different permissions associated with those usernames. Again, when we've done that, we can add different permissions to the users. I'm not going to go to that in detail. It's fairly straightforward. We're going to be concentrating on database-based connections. So the one we are going to look at is database. And we're going to I'll give that security provider a name. We'll just call it security 1 for the sake of something. So it's from there we can go into the users and permissions. We're going to select our table of users. It automatically identifies what is the unique identity field within that table by the fact that it is the primary key. Our username will be the email, and our password will be the password. Fairly straightforward. Our permission name is going to be users. We're going to be getting that from the users table, and the identity column within that is user ID. We can then go down to conditions down here, and our conditions is that the role is equal to you. So there we are, we've created a permission called user, which is allocated to anybody who is the role you, which is what we preset everything to, and that's it. Now the other thing that we need to do, I'm just going to put that spelling mistake right before I do this, is we want to be able to reuse that security provider over and over again in different places. And you notice there is a unique security key. So to allow that to be used in the same way as our database connections are in different parts of our system, we can then create a linked file. So we hit that. That'll create a linked file, and then we can save there. That's now created our security provider, which we can use right throughout the system. Next, we're going to do a login. So let's go into security login. We'll be logging in by email and password, and this one here we're not going to use at this stage. That allows us to set a cookie to be able to remember the password and username and password in a cookie form, and therefore you don't have to log in every time. I'm not going to set that in the sign up section, however we'll be looking at when we're doing the login. Okay, so we saved that, and that should now open a connection, insert anything, set up the security provider, and then log the user in automatically as they are created. We need to be able to show that somehow now. So how we're going to show that, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go back to that index.php page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the login user within that page. So what we're going to do is create a new server connection which will retrieve the details of the currently logged in user. So we'll add our new file and we'll call this get user detail. And this is going to be a really simple step because we're going to be having our data connection. We're going to now add that security provider that we've created, and then we're going to do a very simple query. We're going to do a database query. It's so easy to do, it's unreal. We're going to select users. We'll just select everything for the moment, not always the best thing for security, but I'm keeping things simple. And the condition is simply that the user ID is equal to the security provider identity. What happens is that Wappler will monitor who is logged in, and it will keep the identity, that unique ID for that user within the security provider identity. So we can access that at any time we want within the system. So let's save that. Okay, that's our action saved. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to here. I'm going to add a server connection. And within that server connection, we'll say, call it con get user. And we're going to select that action. So what that's going to do is, as we open that index.php page, it's going to run that server action, and if there is a user logged in, it will return the details of that user. If there isn't, then it's going to return null. I'm just going to pop a container in above that current one there. Row, column, content, and I'm just going to show the user's email address in here. So let's get rid of that text. There we are. Data, query 1, email, select, and we're going to save that. We run that, and I'll just get rid of that unnecessary text. Give me one moment. Looks like it has actually gone. It's just I'm having a little bit of problem with my setup at the moment. Not saving things properly. Oh, sorry, not saving things properly, but not refreshing properly. See there, we do actually have. That's better. It's gone. Right. So why aren't we showing that email address up there? Well, simple reason is, if you remember, when we actually signed in or created our first user, we didn't have that login section written within the code. So what we need to do now is to just try that out again. We'll run that sign up, and we'll have Brian1 at datalogistics.uk. Click sign up. Okay, I seem to have broken the sign up page. Let's have a quick look and see what's going on here. We've got a validation error there. I'm just going to slow down there for a minute, because that's something that I've been meaning to mention quite a bit. Sometimes you get these 500 errors, etc. from server connections, and a lot of people within the forum post queries without actually giving the right information. It's really important here within server connect settings. If you switch on debug mode, then we get some enhanced error messages. This isn't a server error by the looks of it, so let's try that again. Yeah, we've got a bit of a validation issue there for some reason. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cheat here, if you don't mind, because I know exactly where it will be. Sign up. I'm just going to take those validations out for the moment. We validate them at client end, so let's not revalidate them, because these are obviously coming from the server end for some reason. Let's try that again. Just talk among yourselves while I'm doing this. Okay, we've clearly got an issue here that I need to find out. I'm getting an unauthorized error there. So I'm just going to take that security login out for the moment. Sorry, that's a bit of a cop-out. I accept, but we can't spend all of the session looking at that. When I finally figure out what on earth's going on, we'll come back on that one at a later stage. If I take that security login out, that should certainly tell me whether things are working properly or not. In fact, actually, I've just remembered exactly what the problem is. Go on, guys. You should have noticed this one as well. Security login. Just shows everybody can make these mistakes. We're not encrypting that, are we? So we're comparing an unencrypted password with a encrypted password, and that's causing the fail. Yeah, so exclamation mark, if I remember rightly. And I've done that wrong as well. Sorry. That should just have encrypted the email address rather than the password. Let's just go to the password there. SHA-256 salt. Wappler rocks. Try that again now. Sign up. Okay, I really hate you now. Let's just make sure I have actually saved that server action. Passwords and things get worse as we go along, don't they? Hurrah at last. So there we can see that finally we've got that right. Complete oversight there. We forgot to encrypt the password that we were passing to the security login. Sorry about that. I really shouldn't have made that rookie mistake, but I'll put it down to the pressure of speaking to you all. So having created the login, we can now see that we have that user detail is retrieved and is shown within the home page that we wanted. So okay, let's do a log out action. That's a pretty simple one. We've got no parameters need to be passed to that. So we've got our database connection. Technically we don't need that, I suppose. So let's have a quick. We've got our security provider. Yeah, that will need a database connection, won't it? And then we're going to have our security logout. Nice straightforward logout. Now I'm not going to build a full menu because again time constraints etc. However, what I am going to do is just tag a couple of buttons up here so we can see what we're doing. And let's call this button okay, I put that in completely the wrong screen. Just one moment. I want to be in there. I did wonder what was going on. Container. I'm having a bad day today, folks. Sorry about this. Must be getting too cocky, I think. So we'll have that as a red button, standard button, and I'm just going to center that in the column. Yeah, I'm just noticing Theodore's comments about grouping server actions. Yeah, I really should have been using a folder here. Yes, you can create a folder, call it whatever you want, and then within that you can add your action files within there. Laziness, I think, is what I'll put that down to. So we've got our button. We're going to call that logout. Right, so how do we make that button happen? What we're going to do is we've got to link the server connection somehow to the server action that we've created. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to data. We're going to server connection. Call that con logout. Our logout action, but we don't want that to run obviously every time we run a page, otherwise we're just going to log out as soon as we run that page. So what we do is we check no auto load here, and that means that that action is linked but does not run when we load the page. That means then we can go into the button and we can add dynamic event on a mouse click, and on a mouse click we can tell it to run that logout action. Okay, so let's have a look at that in a browser. We're not logged in as anybody at the moment by the looks of it, so that logout isn't going to do very much, but it's there for when we need to use it next, because the next now is to create our login action. I think everybody is your junior Ben. I do think you're the daddy of the organisation, aren't you? Okay, I'll put up. Just drag that into there. Let's rename that, and we're going to call this login. So we need a login page first. So let's have a new page. Let's save it as login. I'm going to go straight over and use blocks just to make life easier. So forms, and I'm just going to use that login one there. Oh no, we won't, because that one doesn't have a template yet. One moment. Okay, so I'm going to do my little trick that I did before. I'm going to add a container in there, and we'll get a different set of forms, and that login form is available. Let's just add a little bit of top spacing to that. We're going to be a post here. That's going to be a server action form, and we're going to be using our login script. So back over to login here in our globals, we're going to be using the login. Whoops, sorry, I'm going to just resave that as PHP page. Well, technically there's no reason why it shouldn't work as an HTML page, but I prefer to work with scripting pages where possible. And I'll just get rid of that HTML page, otherwise I know I'll pick it up at one point and pick the wrong thing. So our link page is login, or login form, and let's pull those variables through email and password. I'm quite conscious, I'm just going to ask everybody a question here. I'm quite conscious that we're 40 minutes in because of that little issue that we had earlier. Which means if I was to go right to the end of our planned presentation, which would be for password change and forgot password routines, I think we're going to run for about another 40 to 45 minutes. How do people feel about it running late, or whether perhaps I can do a separate presentation on the lost password as an extra webinar on another occasion? Could people just tell me what they feel? Okay, let's just crack on then, and if people are happy to let things run over. So we got our email and password passed over from here. I mentioned it before that we also needed a checkbox. So let's have a look. Let's add a checkbox control in totally the wrong place. That's going to be remember. We're going to call that remember, which of course is the standard cookie value within the login scripts that we saw earlier. Let's just give that button a little bit of colour. We'll give it a bit of blue, and that's going to be a submit button. And our re-import, now we see we've got that remember. Okay, so back to our steps. I'm going to try and just step the pace up a little bit here if we can. Database connection, SCRUD. We're not going to have a security rider is going to be security 1. We've got our using permissions already set up there. We're going to do a security login. We're going to remember this time to encrypt our password. Wappler Rocks exclamation. And that should so the Air Theatre Geek, you see, I've never got that to work ever. To be honest, I've never really noticed whether it does or not. It appears to, but I'll investigate that. That's an interesting one to look at a future date. So, okay, we've got that saved. That's all we need for our security login. So we need to link the form to that server action. Let's save that. We now just need to set our actions that we're going to do when the form has been submitted. So we're going into our dynamic events, server connect, success. Just before, we'll just have a browser component in here and it notifies. Back to our form. Our success event, we're going to just go to the home page. In our error event, we're just going to display an error message. But we've got one more to deal with now, and that is an invalid. So when the... Yeah, Tom's asking, does the encryption work regardless of scripting languages? Yeah, that's all dealt with by Wappler. The encryptions are basically industry standard encryptions. The only variation is the way that which the code implements them, and I say that's all done internally within Wappler. Server Connect, we also need an unauthorized, and that is where the login details are invalid. We'll use a warning there. And we'll just say invalid login. Right. Fingers crossed. I've remembered everything this time, and that should work. No, we haven't, because that field there is actually called email, isn't it? Not username, so we just need to switch that over to the appropriate global. So we save that server action. Right, now the big test is, can I remember any of those passwords and things that I set up? I think the very first one I did was seems a lifetime ago. No, we've got an invalid in there. Why have we got an invalid? I've doubtless got that totally wrong. So what I'm actually going to do, just very quickly, because we've got a load of garbage in that users table, is I'm just going to clear it and start again. That's how many failed attempts we've had. Let's do a new sign up. So we sign up, see that we've successfully logged in automatically. That log out we need to have a look at. So let's see why that logout isn't working correctly. There we are, we haven't selected the correct security provider within that server action. Quick refresh. There we are, it's logged out. Notice I had to do a refresh there. That again is something that we should have added to the action. What we can do here is that on that server connect action up there, come on, what we want to actually happen is we want to refresh that page or refresh that data connection after we've logged out. So now click event from there. Let's also reload that get user, and that should clear the screen. Thanks for that, Turn3636. Yeah, it's I'm getting a few things wrong, and yeah, as I always say, you learn more from your mistakes than you do from when things go right. It's just taking a little bit longer than we expected. So that's great, we've got that. Now we go into the login. And let's just try that login. There you see that for once something's worked successfully. It's logged us in as Private Data Logistics UK, and we have the facility to log out. Now if you remember, the way that we showed to be able to hide and show different aspects of buttons, etc., that logout button should actually only appear if there is somebody actually logged in. Otherwise it would be a bit of a farce. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go into this, and this logout button here, I'm going to set its visibility, because that should only show if we have a user ID, and we'll just say greater than 0. So that button will only show if we have a logged in user. So I'll go back in now. See, we've got, if we log out, still hasn't refreshed, has it? You'll see the button disappears because there isn't a logged in user. We need to now add another button, and that's a login. I'm just going to add it side by side. I'm going to add that. I'm going to make that a green button, and we're going to call that login. And that button is only going to be visible when we don't have a user logged in. So I'm actually going to do it back, so I'm going to hide it if user ID is greater than 0. In other words, if we have a logged in user, we don't want to see that button. So you see, we've got login. It would help if I actually linked that button to something. Sorry about that. Actually, that shouldn't be a standard button, should it? That should be an anchor button, because we're going to be creating a link from there. Just going to do things the quick way. Attributes, display, we're going to hide that when the user ID is. I'm going to delete that button, and our anchor button now is going to take us to our login page. Could have at least given it a bit of colour, but we'll show that it works. So Brian at datalogistics.uk. There we are. You see that we've logged in. We've got proof that we're logged in. That login button has now disappeared and the log out button has reappeared.